guys have no Szechuan sauce? No. I want Szechuan sauce. Where's my Szechuan sauce? I'm Kendall Rick. One beloved Dum Dum. I'm Kendall Rick.
No matter how introverted you are, all human beings have a tendency to seek the company of other people with whom they can identify and thus belong to a group or community. Whether it is an ideological collective or professional groups. Even from the rejection of certain groups, new communities with opposite characteristics such as the classic pro-abortion or pro-life arise. There is no denying that belonging to a group has its good points since you can make friends or meet people with your same interests. You keep yourself informed about things that interest you. You feel understood among other things. But what happens when these groups go from following the content of a certain person to almost idolizing and defending to death everything they say? Well, this is where we find the toxic fandoms. To start talking about these groups, I first want to clarify that not all people who belong to a fandom are like that. Clearly now I am going to refer to the noisiest and most controversial ones. There are fandoms of all kinds. Not only music artists but also video games, movies, series, fiction universes and even personalities like Elon Musk. The famous enterprising physicist who has his own musketeers, and yes, that really exists. Fans of Elon Musk are known for defending him at all costs, in all possible media, and in the face of the least criticism that they make of him, treating him as a kind of messiah or god who comes to save humanity with his innovative inventions. And well, the guy can be a genius, but the problem with this fandom, as with others that I will name later, is that many times when you idolize a person who is different from the others and who speaks with a lot of confidence about intelligence, people start to treat him as a superior being and accuse all those who don't understand him or don't share his ideas of being ignorant. This leads me to talk about the character of Rick Sanchez and the fandom of the Rick and Morty cartoon series, which, for those who didn't see it, presents this character as a mad but intelligent scientist. A guy who goes against the current, who has no filter and boasts of being wiser than the others. And well, that's fine, he is a character, I also find him interesting and funny, but his personality is not an example to follow, nor someone with whom it is good to identify. However, it seems that the fandom of this series somehow adopted the characteristics of Rick, and they say that you have to have a high IQ to understand the series, trying to ignore anyone who has not interpreted it in their own way. And not only that, but several violent episodes happened like the famous case of the Szechuan sauce that McDonald's started to sell in their stores. The Szechuan sauce that appears in the movie Mulan, but is also named in an episode of Rick and Morty of the third season. At first everything was going well, the sauce was selling very quickly, and in the shops long lines had formed of people waiting to buy theirs. The problem arose when some branches ran out of sauces, leaving some people unable to buy the product. This caused insults, riots, fights, and it is even said that one person stabbed another person for a sauce. But that is impossible to prove. Even the channel that uploaded this last video writes in the description the following. I ran out of battery and I couldn't continue filming, but right after recording this some people jumped the counter and stole all the sauce. The police had to close the place. There were multiple car accidents in the area as well, although it is not known if they were related to the event. And so with several branches that had many problems of this style. In addition to these cases, this fandom was involved in other controversies, such as the senseless harassment of one of the writers of the series. It turns out that the fans claimed that the quality of the third season had diminished quite a bit by blaming the new female writer, being that in previous seasons all the writers were men. This started a wave of harassment towards the writer where she was insulted to no end, and even her personal data was leaked without her consent. This kind of totally unnecessary harassment leads me to talk about the fandom where another animated series was involved in controversies of this style. Steven Universe. Unlike Rick and Morty, Steven Universe is a series that makes references to issues related to LGBT groups, unconventional families and love. It's ironic that a series that talks so much about inclusion and love has such a toxic fandom, but well, as we said before, these things happen. The fans of this series were involved in a lot of controversy, but I'm going to talk only about some of them, like the harassment that a girl who made drawings of the series known as Sammy070 received. First, she was accused of being fat, phobic and racist for having drawn two characters thinner than they really are and one with a smaller nose. And another one without her typical afro hairstyle, but in addition to that ridiculousness, they insulted her to no end and accused her of other much more serious things until she tried to take her own life. Besides this episode, the fandom also went to cancel the director of the show herself when a book was published with the sketches and drawings that originated the series. Among those drawings there was a black-skinned character who said in his description that he couldn't read, and this was taken as a racist comment, which in my opinion the racist thing is to be offended by that instead of it going unnoticed, but well. The fans were so offended that the director had to go out and apologize because it wasn't even her responsibility what happened because she is not a cartoonist, and she wasn't a character that was included in the series at the end. All the things that happened with the Steven Universe fandom confirm to me what this tweet from Soundsight says, a fiction writer who wrote the following. Toxic fandoms have 6 stages. I love this belongs to me, I can control this, I can't control this, I hate this, and finally I must destroy this. People idealize the artist or the series they consume so much that when they don't respond to their perfect idealization, they attack it and end up even turning against it, feeling let down by something that in reality was always an idea in their heads because obviously nobody is perfect and nobody can conform to everybody with what they say or do. I repeat again what I said at the beginning of the video. Not all the fans of this series are like that. The problem is that certain groups of people, being so controversial, end up making more noise than the rest and as a consequence, leave the whole fandom in a bad light. As a last example, and probably the best known in recent times, could not miss the fans of BTS known as the ARMY. Of this community and talk a lot, and I think the most unbearable that have for many is the habit of publishing their fan caps on Twitter in response to anything. Even at times when it is talking about serious issues. The fan caps are videos of their idols who usually spammy and everywhere to increase playback, and I think also with the aim of making them more known, but if so the truth is that I do not think it works. In addition to spamming these videos, this community is known for defending their idols at all costs every time they criticize them. The YouTuber Luke Corns did an experiment in one of his videos in which he published a tweet saying that K-pop and especially his videos are terrible, and as a result in a few minutes he had a horde of fanatics stop following him, insulting him for his physique and his career, and is wishing him death. At the end of the video Luke makes a rather interesting reflection, saying that fandoms work like a family. The fact that they insult your family will always make you angry and I agree with that, although I don't think it's right to normalize it because, as we saw with other fandoms, those attitudes can end up affecting third parties a lot. I think that taking the examples I mentioned before, what all these fandom have in common is that they found in their idols a model to follow, a person they can imitate, a philosophy of life that they can take to form a personality based on that, and thus differentiate themselves from the rest of the people. It's not for nothing that the members of fandom tend to be mostly teenagers. The problem is when that fanaticism becomes an obsession that ends up filling people completely with a feeling of superiority that makes them criticize anyone who doesn't share their same thoughts. While we all want to be different from others in some way, I believe that being different should not be a person's goal, but a consequence of being oneself and developing one's own thinking. Sometimes people become so obsessed with being different that they end up being the same as each other, or worse, they become what they criticize. That happens more than anything in politics that also formed many toxic communities on the internet, and sometimes even two opposing sides end up being exactly the same and having the same attitudes they complain about. Besides the toxicity and problems that these fandoms can cause, unfortunately sometimes they end up leaving the artist or the product they like in a bad light. Just think of how many people don't want to know anything about BTS because they are sick of seeing their fan caps everywhere. This shouldn't be the case anymore because the band members have nothing to do with what their fans do, but it happens all the time, and especially in the music world. Certain bands that have a community of teenage fans with a bad reputation are labeled as commercials or typical boy band, when in fact sometimes they make very good music. The problem is not the series itself, but the way it is played. The fact that Rick's character is a toxic and quite delusional person doesn't mean that he is made to be admired or taken as an example. In fiction there are characters that end up being a criticism of a certain behavior rather than a good example. Anyone with a little bit of common sense would realize that. In conclusion, I think you have to start separating the product or the artist from their own fandom and stop judging them for that. Mostly because there are toxic people everywhere, and that doesn't mean that a certain band or movie is bad. Maybe because of these toxic people we are depriving ourselves of seeing or hearing something very interesting that we might like, and it doesn't have to be like that. The best thing we can do is enjoy the content and be careful not to idealize it too much, understanding that nothing and nobody is perfect, and accepting that we are never going to agree 100% with anybody, because that's exactly what makes us all different.